Good afternoon, everybody. Lee's here, back at you with another Wall Street Journal wrap up today, a little bit later today. And so I've got some very interesting articles here today, and hopefully I'll do a little bit of screen sharing with you. Hope that works out okay and helps you understand some of the subjects a little bit. Let me know what you think. So first of all, I'm going to start with the Kansas City Southern Railroad rejected a buyout. The buyout was about $20 billion. And really the way you look at it is the premium on a share, how much more somebody would get per share. And so it was a 35% premium to the share price. Isn't this an amazing time that a railroad is rejecting an offer that's 5% higher than its current price? I mean, I just think railroads are all done, right? Just an ancient dying thing. Let them die on their own. Well, it's not the truth. Railroads still move a whole lot of freight very efficiently across the world. And in fact, Kansas City Southern is famous for how they've really made money is their Mexican routes. They connect directly to Mexico, and I guess they co-own some tracks in Mexico. In fact, used to go all the way down to Venezuela. I don't know if that's still true. But Kansas City Southern is the smallest of the 5 major railroads. There's, I think, 8 Class 1 railroads, they call them. In the railroad lingo for regulations, there's Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. And Kansas City Southern will be a Class 1. So 3,400 miles of track. So I found it interesting, even as something as low tech as locomotives and railroads, they're still working on making them better. By the way, I was offered when I graduated from college of working on computer systems that were on railroad code. I turned it down because as it was, the computer systems were really dated, and I didn't want to work on old computer stuff and hurt my career, and I think I would have, but it was an intriguing job offer from Milwaukee Road, as I remember, out of Chicago. Somebody might correct me if I remember it was out of Chicago, and I think it was Milwaukee Road. So, but they've got this new operating plan that what they do is they're running longer trains with a tighter schedule, so they can commit to, I think, delivery schedules a lot easier, and that allows them to use fewer locomotives and fewer cars. And so there's a lot of expense tied up in those locomotives. If you had to guess, how many locomotives would you think that Kansas City Southern would have? 580 locomotives. That's a lot of maintenance when you think about the complexity of a diesel or a diesel electric locomotive. By the way, how many of you would know how many of those are older than I am? They've got almost 600 locomotives. 68 of them are older than I am. So that's amazing that they can keep locomotives running that long. That's just some of you won't be very surprised, but I'm kind of surprised at it. A little bit of trivia. What's a state that doesn't have any railroad? Hawaii, not 1 mile of track. And it's interesting if you think back, and I remember reading a great book on the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad. I forgot his famous author's written, and I have slipped my mind right now, but it's a great book. The greatest project ever did, or the greatest, I don't know, something like that. But, the railroad, the Transcontinental, followed the stagecoach route. And it's interesting, they did the stagecoach route. They mapped that out, surveyed that horseback. Stagecoach followed that. Later, the railroads come along and said, well, we better check that. They checked all the routes out and said the stagecoach route was the best way. And then the interstate came by later, and they determined the route. So back there on horseback, they determined the best route for every single form of transportation across the country we've come up with. But those corridors have turned out to be a real moneymaker. Out in the country, those corridors were 100 feet on each side of the track, 100 feet from the middle of the track, and in the cities, usually it was 100 foot. But the utility corridors for high-speed internet, telephone, all sorts of plumbing and utilities. A lot of you see a railroad track heading across the country, have no idea what's traveling underneath it. And those have been hugely valuable, because if you want to lay cable from one end of the country to the other, the easiest route is right next to a railroad track. The easements are all done for you. So huge moneymaker on that. I tried to pull up some data on that, and I just didn't get it before the call. But railroads originally were given most of that by states and federal government. They're given 180 million acres. And back then, the value of that was about $1 an acre. But it's not clear. There is some legality issues on some easements. Some of them are an easement. You call it an easement. It really is an easement. So somebody has given the railroad an easement, but it's really owned by a state or a city. In other cases, the railroad actually owns it. So Lucid Air, our newest car, and I'm going to try to share the screen here, newest electric car. See if I can get this going here. Okay, I'm there. So this is another electric car that just debated the other day, and it costs around the cheapest model is about $95K, which won't be one of the first models, and it goes up to about $169K. By the way, that's after subsidies. So they're going to sell that in late 2021. Battery range of about 500 miles. That's pretty impressive. It's going to be a direct sale model like the Tesla, so it'll compete against. I think the acknowledgement that Tesla figured out that market, the high-end market for electric cars. I know they're selling some at $70,000 now, but that's taken them a long time, 5-6 years to get to that point, and they're still pretty expensive. But look, maybe you can't read it, but the far left, 1,080 is the maximum horsepower. 1,000 horsepower, and that other number, 9.9, that's the number of seconds to get to a quarter mile. Really, really car. So interesting car. This is out of California, by the way. The company's based in California. So observation on electric cars. Why are many electric vehicles aimed at wealthy buyers? They're really to afford $70,000, $80,000 car, you got to there an income. So they aimed at wealthy buyers. Be interesting to hear from you on that. Just want to make sure I'm setting up for comments. Great. I'm setting them. Okay. The reason it's aimed for wealthy buyers is you have to have extra to buy one. And when I say you have to have extra money, it means the ROI, return on investment, is not there. A person with a normal income can't buy buying this over a normal vehicle. And discussion earlier with friends of mine talked about hybrids, and hybrids really are the way right now. You get a range on the electric, but you get the best worlds with nowadays. I think we checked this morning, some buddies and I, a little over $1,000 for the hybrid, where that used to be $1,000 premium. But the return on investment is just not there. Most analysis will tell you that to run an electric car, after you buy it, by the way, you got to make that initial cut, it'll cost you about $400 a year to run an electric car, and about $1,100 a year run a gas car. So you've got a delta of about $700 a year. Let's say you keep a car 10 years. A lot of people don't. So that's $7,000 delta. The premium right now for electric cars is well above that number. So you don't electric car to save. You buy an electric car to save the globe, and you got to have some kind of belief like that. Or you just think it's neat and you have money, and that's okay. I buy things that I like. I have a truck and I don't need it, so but I like trucks, so I understand it. And I'm not criticizing anybody that does. So, and by the way, usually you have to buy a charging station for your home. Smaller cars can use a smaller charging station, but charging station is going to run you almost $1,000 in your. So when you buy that car, you have to add another $1,000 to put that charging station in your home. You're not going to run over the grocery store every day and sit there for hours while it charges. And by the way, most of them are pay stations now too. Interesting thing. They said 300 miles of charging in 20 minutes with using their high-powered charger. 300 miles in 20 minutes. That's pretty interesting. That's getting down to where I think, wow, if I could have a 500-mile range, come home or go somewhere and set for 20 minutes and go another 500 miles, that's pretty interesting. So, by the way, some states have separate charging fees that they charge electricity, a less fee for electricity. I think California is one. It requires you to have a separate meter on your charging station for your vehicle, but you can get a cheaper gas for that. So that's the Lucid Air. I like the name. I love the name, and the styling is pretty nice, but it's another Lexus with a few distinctions. So third article, bulldozers are fighting fires in California. So there's over 300 bulldozers trying to get rid of burnable path through the fire, right? A burnable material, and bulldoze it out of the way. And California owns about 60 bulldozers. These are those big cats. They call them caterpillars, right? Cats, D3s, and so on. And private contractors are filling in the rest. There's about 250 of them. These bulldozers typically cost about $500,000 each. And it's really easy to get into this. They said it's an 8-hour course, training course, to become one and to join, and join the fight. And there's a lot of them out there helping right now. So one guy said he was a former tank operator in the service, and then he became a timber guy. Well, California shut down a lot of the timbering. So a lot of these guys are looking for work. So this is one thing they can do. And long days, 12 hours a day, they'll drive these cats. I can't imagine that, the amount of work that is. They're rigged with heat resistant curtains, so that as the fire gets too close, they can pull the curtains down real quickly and get underneath them. One guy I thought was interesting. He says he's twice used this method where he uses the dozer blade to dig a trench, a pit, and then he jumps down into the pit while the fire goes over the top. And I thought, boy, that's pretty dangerous work. So the question I have is, of course, they're all busy right now in the fire season, right in the middle of the fire and the dangerous time. Why aren't they doing this out season? Why aren't they creating big swaths across this area? Well, I think we all know the reason, right? I think environmentalists just would pull their hair out at these big dirty marks across the landscape. How would they refer to it? And don't want that. In fact, environmentalists really fight every time this happens. They don't like it, and they fight against it. Some of their criticisms, I think, are valid. And I talked about this the other day with fire roads. Unless they're wide enough and they have the Santa Ana winds or Diablo winds, the fire embers blow right across them. But I think if your residence was below that timber line and they were up there cutting the path, you'd appreciate those dozers being up there. The other observation I had about this is how many skills like those driving are dying out. I wonder with the timber industry dying out and some others, are we losing some skills? And that may be one skill that in 50 years we don't talk about anymore. I don't know. Where do you go to learn how to drive a dozer? Is there a dozer technical school out there somewhere? Might be. Fourth one. Let me share the screen here again and talk about so this is the I'm going to check the screen here real quick and make sure I'm okay. So COVID deaths, I thought I'd share a little update with you on the COVID infections. And I'll get back to another one about the Trump court picks here. But COVID infecting the young people, really, and I'll show you a chart here in a minute, but COVID seems to be affecting young people more and more. So we'll see. We'll talk about why that is. But so here's the share of deaths in the U.S. And you can see that most days now, and most days we're in the 500 range, and then they'll jump up to 1,000 on a one day, and then back down to around 500. So from 2,000 in the peak of this, we're down in the 500s a day now on the deaths. It does seem like that's leveling off, and that's a little bit scary. Is this going to be the new norm for X amount of months? I don't know, but it doesn't look like it has the peaks, the peak that it had before. But you can see from, really from July, it's slightly going down on the days. The bad days still a little over 1,000. Okay, there's 1,206. So there's where we are for the deaths. Let me scroll down and now go check to make sure I'm projecting right. Great. So here's the here's on daily reported COVID cases. The last day of September 10th, 16,000. So, and then we had one at 34,000. So way down from of course, we really ramped up testing here, and it took off as obviously as testing off. So this primarily talks about how much testing we've done, right? This really shows how much testing we've done. Whereas is back here, there really were a whole lot more sick with COVID. We just didn't know it. And we'll show that next screen. The reason we know it, because they felt good and had no symptoms. And they were young. They weren't dying like old people were. So so here's the interesting chart that I wanted to talk to is the new, I want to check this out to make sure it's projecting right. Thanks for giving me a minute there. So here's where it's showing that, by age, and, if you look at by age, if you look at a little over 50% are under 39 years old, and you notice it's gone up, right? So the 0 to 19, the 20 to 39, and the 40 to 59 years has gone up as we've increased testing. What hasn't changed much is the cases over 60. So actually over 80 hasn't changed very much at over 60. It's changed a little bit. But if you look at the numbers, 80% of the people who have COVID cases are under the age of 60, 80%. So and those usually are the people that are are healthier. So interesting stats there. So the observation is, has COVID become less deadly? And I got to tell you, that's what the scientists can't answer right now. They have gotten better at treating very serious cases in the intensive care unit. They understand the drugs better. They understand how to use the ventilator and when not to use it. It was overused to begin with when we wanted thousands of them, right? And so they've learned how to treat them better. But the toll is varying dramatically by community, and so by social groupings. And so it's very difficult for the scientists to tell right now whether it's less deadly. It would appear like it's less deadly if you look at the graph. Okay. And then the other question you'd have to ask, are more young people getting infected? So, you would certainly look at this and say, well, more young people are getting infected. Well, are they, or are we testing a whole bunch of young people? Remember when we first started testing, who were we testing? Only those with symptoms. If you didn't have symptoms, in fact, it's 2 symptoms like taste and coughing or whatever, you didn't get tested. So it's intriguing on how, we've increased testing. We've increased testing with a lot of young people, right? Going back to college, they've mandatory testing a lot of places. A lot of work now is mandatory. School age kids, a lot of them are mandatory testing. So we're forcing testing on a large group of people who may be asymptomatic, not ill at all. They may spread the disease or may not. You can argue that the science on that is not real known, though under age 18, the science is pretty solid that they do not spread the disease very well at all. They're not very good at spreading this, even though they may carry that infection. So, why young people? Well, certainly they're more sociable. I always say they really think that nothing will ever happen to them. So they're bulletproof, as we often say. And again, they might have been sick before, and they might have found this number of people months ago if they'd have tested that many people. By the way, Europe has been some people very quiet about this because remember a lot of criticism about Trump. He had the worst country, right? And the most sick people. So obviously it addressed the leadership, and obviously Trump was a lousy leader because he allowed the COVID to run rampant in this country when in fact all of Europe didn't. They had better leaders, obviously. Well, that's nonsense tying, COVID, the death rate of COVID or how serious it got to the leader. I think the leader has a lot less ability to control that than any would hope that they would. But so now Europe is actually having a lot more infections. But interesting enough, like the U.S., the rate of hospitalizations and deaths have remained low. So they're not seeing they're seeing the same problem the U.S. is. A lot more cases are coming up. So last item today is Trump is listing his court picks, Supreme Court picks again, and potential court picks, and listing lots of names. I think there's over 40 to 50 names that he's added 20 names that weren't on the previous short list, including 3 senators. I'm not sure what that's all about. I think one senator already, I think Tom Cotton, has said he does not want to be a jurist. But I got to say, whatever you think of Trump, in 2016, when he put his Supreme Court picks out there before the election, that was a brilliant move. You can say all you want to say about Trump. He does great things occasionally that doesn't get the credit. There were a lot of people uneasy with Trump in 2016, and they couldn't figure out if he was a real conservative or a liberal, trying to hide as a conservative, right? Rhino, a Republican in name only. And that list encouraged people and thought, the next president is going to put some jurists in there, and he did. Obviously, he had that opportunity to do that, and so that list meant a lot to a lot of people, and really, I think, cemented his win. I believe it really led to his win. One of the major factors. So, interesting enough, who do you think Biden has committed to court? And maybe you've not heard this. This hasn't got a lot of press right now. But what has Biden committed to doing to the court? This doesn't take a lot of skill for you to figure this out. He's done the same thing as he did on vice president. He said, I'm going to put a black woman on the Supreme Court. So he's already made that statement. Now, that's all he said about it. He hasn't said, he hasn't given a list of black women. So how come Biden hasn't given a list of Supreme Court nominees? His staff has got to look at what Trump did and said, man, that really worked. If you want to charge up our base, talk to him. I mean, there's huge issues that may come up in the court in the future. The abortion ruling is one, gun rights rulings. I mean, Democrats got to be really interested in the court and want to change the makeup of it. And by the way, there's 2 justices in their 80s right now. Do you think they'll outlive another 4-year presidency? May not. Hate to tell them that, but they're living on borrowed time. So how come Biden has not come out with that list? It's intriguing because you would think his supporters would want to see that, and people could look at that and say, yeah, that's who I want on the court. So, and by the way, they would want to see judicial activists, right? They want to see something that doesn't look at the original language of the Constitution, which textless, we call them textless. Some people use constructionist, that's a different term, but slightly different, but textless. I look at the original text, and that's what they meant. Obviously, Biden wouldn't want that. He wants to read today's world into that language and change it. So interesting there. I contend Biden won't bring that list out before election. He can't do that. I think the generalities of putting a black person on as a vice president to try to convince black people that, he's for them and to buy some of that black vote is probably, and a woman, of course, will help him. But I'd like to see more of what he's thinking on the court. That'd be, and a lot of people, I think, voting for him would like to see that too. So, okay, a lot of interesting things today. Hope you found it interesting, and have a great day. See you tomorrow. Cheers.